Evening. Welcome to House Groups. We are starting a brand new 3-week series tonight called Power Source. I hope you were able to catch the message on Sunday. It's a really important one for the future direction of our church, and so we're asking that everybody hear it. So if you haven't heard it yet, get on the app, go online, go on Facebook, find us somewhere, and make sure you listen. We're sensing that God is leading us as a church, that we need to establish a culture of prayer. Now, of course, there's prayer, right? There's some people in our church that take prayer really seriously, although that number is significantly lower than it should be. Like, yes, we have a prayer team with a handful of people on it. Bless their souls. Yes, we've had seasons where we intentionally have prayed for things, but we don't have a culture of prayer in our church. It doesn't permeate what we do. We're not as reliant on God as we should be. I feel like God's giving me this picture I just keep thinking of, where I'm imagining that we've built this really elaborate structure of our church, but we haven't yet truly plugged it in to God's power. And so our goal over the next year or so is to begin to establish a culture of prayer. It's going to take time. One of the things that we're going to start with is starting even this upcoming Sunday, that's April 7th, we're going to start having a prayer meeting before our services begin every single week. And I'm going to lead it. It's going to start at 9 o'clock to 9:15 in the cafeteria right at church. And so we want you to come. We want you to pray with us that God would start with this church in this area to really just make a foundational difference. We're going to start praying for things like revival in our area and that God would use us as a part of that. One of the things that I think you're going to see in this series, one of the themes that you'll see, is that most of the ways that the church in America needs to plug into God's power, most of those ways are actually old ways. They're the old paths. Christian author and thinker Os Guinness says that the church always goes forward best by going backward first, which is so true in history. Like, there are always going to be churches that make like a quick splash because they're doing something novel or new, but they tend to just fade away in a generation. The churches that start movements, the churches that start revival, where you just see thousands upon thousands of people coming to Christ and stories of God moving, those are the churches that go back to the old ways. Like, they go back to what you see in the book of Acts, right? And you see prayer. You see the teaching of the word, evangelism, discipleship, community. It's the basics. Now, they're still wise in their culture, right? This is an important aspect of just being missional to your culture. This is why Paul says in 1 Corinthians, when I'm with the Jews, I'm like a Jew. When I'm with the Gentiles, I'm like the Gentile. We still need to be wise in how we bring the gospel in our culture. But we need to understand that the power of God is not in our method. It's in Him. It's in prayer. It's in connecting and plugging into God. And I just think God has us in this season where we as a church, we just need to publicly admit our weakness, which is tempting not to do in our situation, honestly. Like, no one would fault us if we didn't, because things are going quite well, right? We're still adding close to 100 people a year. We're planting churches at a rate faster than almost anyone in Minnesota right now. We're seeing all these results at our outreaches, but that's not from us. Like, that's from God. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul says that he will boast in his weaknesses. And I think some people, you may be familiar with that part of the verse, but what he says next is, so that Christ's power may rest on him. Like, that's how you plug into the power source. You first have to admit that you're weak. You first have to admit that you don't have the power. And I think we as the people of Renovation Church are not going to see God's power truly rest on our church until we can come to Him in weakness. Until we can come to Him saying, God, you need to do this. Like, our ideas, our methods are not enough. But if we truly plug those into you, God, then you're seriously going to change the world. Amen.